The city streets, once alive with the footsteps of passers-by, the chatter of street vendors, and the hum of cars, grew quiet by evening, giving way to the rustle of fallen leaves and the cold breath of the autumn wind. In a narrow alley on the outskirts, where gray, peeling apartment buildings crowded together and rusted trash bins emitted a sharp smell of dampness and decay, a Labrador named Maya lay hidden. Her coat, once a glossy golden with black markings, was now matted and grimy, her thin sides betraying weeks of hunger and wandering. Her ribs protruded under her skin, faint shadows of her former strength. But it wasn't her gaunt appearance that caught the attention of the rare passerby. Maya's eyes, deep as the night sky and filled with sorrow, seemed to plead for help, locking onto anyone who came into view. She lay on an old piece of tarp, pressed against a concrete wall to shield herself from the biting wind. Nearby, in a makeshift nest of tattered rags, newspapers, and dry leaves, 6 tiny puppies whimpered softly. Their thin coats, barely covering their pink skin, offered no protection from the cold, and their faint, almost inaudible voices were lost in the wind's howl. Maya gazed at them with boundless love, but her eyes were clouded with fear. Her milk had nearly run dry. Her strength was fading by the hour, and her puppy-sure precious treasures steered on the brink of life and death. When footsteps echoed in the alley, Maya lifted her head. She didn't bark or growl, she begged. Her eyes, veiled with exhaustion, followed every person who passed by. A soft, trembling whimper, like the whisper of autumn rain, escaped her chest. But people looked away. Some quickened their pace, as if afraid to be tainted by her desperation. Others frowned, muttering, "Strays, breeding again." Maya didn't understand their words, but she felt their coldness, and each rejection pierced her heart like a shard of glass. She hadn't always been like this. Once, Maya lived in a cozy apartment where warm hands stroked her fur, and her bowl was always filled with fragrant food. They called her by name, scratched behind her ears, and she fell asleep by a warm radiator, feeling safe. But her owners vanished. Maybe they moved away. Maybe they abandoned her. Maya didn't know. Pregnant, she found herself on the streets, carrying a burden she swore to protect. She learned to hide from downpours under building awnings, scavenge for bread crusts and bones in trash heaps, and slip away from aggressive stray dogs, whose growls and bared teeth were a constant threat. But with the birth of her puppies, everything changed. She couldn't leave them even for a moment, couldn't venture far to find food. They were her world, and Maya gave them everything: her milk, her warmth, her hope. That evening, the alley felt especially bleak. A cold wind swept bits of litter and leaves across the pavement, and the lone streetlight above the trash bins flickered, casting uneven shadows. Maya pressed herself against her puppies, trying to warm them with her thin body, but her own warmth was fading. Her breathing was heavy. Her eyes, brimming with tears, stared into the void. Suddenly, footsteps broke the silence. A young woman, Emily, was crossing the alley on her way home from work. She was the kind of person who noticed small things: a sparrow pecking at crumbs at a bus stop, an elderly woman carrying a heavy bag, or a cat seeking shelter from the rain. But that evening, Emily was lost in her thoughts. The exhaustion of a long day weighed on her shoulders, her mind swirling with worries, bills, deadlines, a spat with a coworker. Maya, sensing her approach, mustered her last strength and stood. Her legs trembled, but she took a step forward and let out a soft, piercing whimper that shattered the alley's silence. Emily stopped. Her gaze fell on Maya, then slid to the nest where the puppy's faint whimpers drifted out. Their tiny bodies, shivering from the cold, were nearly hidden by the rags. Her heart clenched. She'd seen stray dogs before, but something in Maya's eyes, a mix of despair and hope, made her freeze. "Oh, sweetheart," Emily whispered, her voice trembling. She stepped closer, but Maya tensed, her ears flattening, her body rigid in a protective stance. Years on the streets had taught her not to trust people, but she didn't back away, standing firm between Emily and her puppies. Emily noticed how the thin Labrador trembled, how her ribs jutted out under her skin, and felt a lump in her throat. She couldn't just walk away like the others. Slowly crouching down, Emily opened her bag and pulled out a half-eaten sandwich she'd taken for lunch. Carefully, avoiding sudden movements, she placed the food on the pavement and stepped back. Maya watched her, her nose twitching as it caught the scent. Hunger battled fear, but her maternal instinct won. She took a step, then another, and finally grabbed the sandwich, swallowing it in a few desperate bites. Her eyes, wary and alert, never left Emily. Emily watched, her heart breaking. She saw how Maya fought, how she sacrificed herself for her puppies. In that moment, Emily knew she couldn't leave them in this cold alley at the mercy of fate. She pulled out her phone and started searching for local volunteers and shelters, but the night was late and no one answered. Emily looked at Maya, who had returned to her puppies and lay down, shielding them with her body. "I'll be back," Emily whispered, her voice firm with resolve. "I promise." Maya, as if hearing her, lifted her head. Her eyes, damp with exhaustion, met Emily's. In that moment, a connection formed, fragile but unbreakable. The night was long. Emily lay in her small apartment, but sleep wouldn't come. The image of Maya, the gaunt Labrador with tear-filled eyes, and her tiny puppy shivering in the cold alley haunted her. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the faint squeaks of the pups and their mother's piercing whimper. Emily tossed and turned, guilt gnawing at her for leaving them under that flickering streetlight. But she knew she'd return with help. At dawn, as the sky turned a pale gray, Emily was already up. She gathered everything she could find at home: a can of tuna she'd bought for a neighbor's cat, an old wool blanket, a bottle of water, and a plastic bowl. At a 24-hour store, she bought a bag of puppy food and a couple of cans of meat puree. Her hands shook as she packed it all into a backpack, but a fierce determination burned in her chest, like a small but bright flame. She didn't know how she'd save this family, but she couldn't let them perish. The alley greeted her with dampness and silence. Morning fog curled over the pavement, and the trash bins, coated in dew, smelled even sharper. Emily stopped at the entrance, her eyes searching for Maya. The Labrador lay on the same piece of tarp, shielding her puppies with her body like a shield. Their squeaks were barely audible, and Emily felt her throat tighten with pain. Maya lifted her head, her ears twitching, her exhausted eyes meeting Emily's. That same mix of fear and hope lingered in them, but now Maya didn't whimper. She waited. "I'm back," Emily said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. "I'm going to help you." She crouched slowly, careful not to startle Maya. Pulling out a can of meat puree, Emily opened it, and the smell wafted through the alley. Maya tensed, her nose quivering as it caught the scent. Hunger was stronger than fear, but she didn't move, her eyes darting between the food and her puppies. Emily placed the bowl of puree on the pavement and stepped back, giving Maya space. The Labrador watched her, her legs trembling, but her maternal instinct took over. She approached slowly, her movements cautious, almost stealthy. Finally, she lowered her head to the bowl and began eating, gulping down the food greedily. Emily watched, her eyes filling with tears. She saw how Maya fought for every bite, how her emaciated body shook with weakness. This wasn't just a dog, this was a mother willing to sacrifice everything for her children. Emily pulled out a second bowl and mixed the puppy food with water, creating a mush the pups could eat. She inched closer to the nest, but Maya's head shot up, her ears flattening, a protective fire flaring in her eyes. "It's okay, girl," Emily whispered, her voice soft as the morning light. "I won't touch your babies." Maya stared at her, her breathing heavy. Emily froze, unmoving, until the Labrador lowered her head back to the bowl. Only then did Emily gently slide the bowl of mush toward the puppies. Their tiny noses twitched, catching the scent, and they clumsily crawled toward the food. For the first time in their short lives, they ate something other than their mother's dwindling milk. Their faint squeaks turned to soft smacking sounds, and Emily couldn't hold back tears as she watched their tiny faces, smeared with food, their eyes flickering with the first faint spark of life. Maya finished eating and returned to her puppies. Her gaze was still wary, but there was less fear in it now. She lay down beside them, shielding them with her body. Emily pulled out the blanket and carefully draped it over the puppies, leaving space for Maya to keep them warm. The Labrador didn't flinch. Her nose brushed the fabric, as if in thanks. Emily knew the food and blanket were only temporary aid. Maya and her puppies needed more: warmth, safety, medical care. She pulled out her phone and called her friend Sarah, a volunteer at a local shelter. Sarah answered immediately, listened to the story, and promised to come with a carrier and contact a vet. But she warned, "The shelter's full, Emily. Finding space for a whole dog family will be tough." "I'll find a way," Emily said firmly, her voice brimming with determination. "They're not staying here." While waiting for Sarah, Emily sat in the corner of the alley, her eyes fixed on Maya. The Labrador, as if sensing a change, relaxed. Her breathing steadied, and her eyes, still tinged with worry, now looked at Emily with cautious trust. Emily extended her hand, not touching Maya, and spoke softly. "You're strong, girl. You've done everything to protect them. I'm with you now." Maya tilted her head, her ears twitching, as if she understood. In that moment, Emily felt a bond not just between a human and a dog, but between two hearts, united by a single purpose. When Sarah's van pulled up, Emily stood. Sarah, with disheveled hair and dark circles under her eyes from sleepless nights at the shelter, stepped out with a large pet carrier and a bag of medical supplies. Seeing Maya and the puppies, she sighed, "Poor things. How did they even survive?" Emily recounted how she found them, how Maya begged passers-by, how she gave everything for her puppies. Sarah listened, her fingers nervously fiddling with her jacket zipper. "We need to get them to a vet, right now," she said, her voice serious. Emily nodded, knowing that earning Maya's trust would be a challenge. The Labrador wouldn't let her puppies be taken easily. Emily knelt beside Maya and spoke softly. "Girl, we want to help. We're taking you to a safe place." Maya tilted her head, her nose twitching, as if trying to sense the sincerity in Emily's voice. Sarah carefully opened the carrier and set it near the nest. She pulled out a soft towel and began gently transferring the puppies one by one. Their tiny bodies were so light, they seemed almost weightless. Maya tensed, her body trembling, but she didn't growl, only watched, her eyes darting between the puppies and Emily. "It's okay," Emily whispered, her voice shaking. "We won't separate you, I promise." Once all 6 puppies were tucked into the carrier, wrapped in the towel, Sarah turned to Maya. The Labrador rose slowly, her legs shaky from weakness. Emily offered more meat puree to distract her, placing it in front of her. Maya ate greedily, but her eyes stayed fixed on the carrier. Emily and Sarah exchanged a glance, knowing the hardest part was ahead. "If we're careful, she'll follow the puppies," Sarah said, her voice hopeful. Emily nodded and slowly lifted the carrier, holding it so Maya could see her pups. The Labrador stepped forward, her nose nearly touching the carrier's bars. Emily and Sarah moved toward the van, walking slowly to avoid startling Maya. To their relief, she followed, her steps unsteady but determined. When they reached the van, Sarah opened the back door and Emily placed the carrier inside. Maya froze, her ears twitching, but Emily knelt beside her. "Come on, girl," she said, her eyes glistening with tears. "We're together." Maya looked at Emily, then at the carrier, and, as if making a choice, jumped into the van. She lay down beside her puppies, her body shielding them like a barrier. Emily and Sarah closed the door, their hearts pounding with a mix of relief and anxiety. Emily sat beside Maya, her hand resting on the carrier's edge to soothe the Labrador. The van started, and the bleak alley, filled with cold and despair, faded behind them. The veterinary clinic was a half-hour drive away. When they arrived, morning was breaking, and the first rays of sunlight pierced the gray clouds. The clinic, a small building with peeling paint, was familiar to Sarah. She'd saved countless strays there. The vet, an older woman named Dr. Helen Carter, met them at the entrance. Seeing Maya and the puppies, she frowned, her expression grave. "They're in rough shape," she said, examining Maya while Emily and Sarah held the carrier. "The mother's exhausted, the puppies are on the edge. We need blood work immediately." Emily felt her heart tighten. She watched Maya lying on the exam table, her eyes full of fear but compliant. The puppies were taken to a separate room for examination, and Maya let out a soft whine, her gaze following them. Emily, for the first time, dared to touch her, stroking her head. Maya flinched but didn't pull away. "You're doing great, girl," Emily whispered, her voice trembling. "We'll save them." Dr. Carter began the exam. Maya was so weak, she had to be fed a liquid nutrient mix through a syringe. Tests revealed dehydration, anemia, and an infection caused by malnutrition. The puppies, though alive, suffered from hunger and hypothermia. Dr. Carter looked at Emily and Sarah, her face stern, but her eyes compassionate. "They're lucky you found them," she said. "Another day or two." She trailed off, but Emily understood. Standing in the clinic's hallway, Emily watched Maya through the exam room's glass window. Her hands shook, anxiety for the puppies' lives mixing with resolve. She knew this was just the beginning, but she was ready to see it through. The clinic became a temporary refuge. Maya received nutrient mixes, and the puppies were kept warm in an incubator. Emily spent every free hour there, sitting by Maya's enclosure or watching the puppies, whose tiny paws began to stir under the heat lamps. Within a week, Maya started to stand, her movements weak but steady. The puppies' eyes opened, gleaming with curiosity, their squeaks growing louder. Dr. Carter approved their transfer to the shelter where Sarah worked. The shelter, an old building on the city's edge, surrounded by a sagging fence, was overcrowded. But Sarah persuaded the director to make room for Maya and her puppies. Emily and Sarah prepared an enclosure, warm blankets, water bowls, and a soft bed of straw. When the van pulled up to the shelter, Emily opened the back door, her heart racing. Maya, still wary, stepped out, her nose immediately seeking the carrier where her puppies squeaked. She stayed close to them. "Welcome home, girl," Emily said softly, setting the carrier in the enclosure. Maya stepped inside, her paws tentative, but feeling the warmth of the blankets, she lay down, shielding her puppies with her body. For the first time in months, she was safe. Emily sat nearby, her hand resting on the enclosure's bars. Maya looked at her, and in her eyes, still clouded with fatigue, a spark of trust flickered. Emily smiled, her throat tight with tears. "You did it, Maya," she whispered. "You protected them." A new chapter began at the shelter. Maya, fed liquid nutrients at first, gradually transitioned to solid food. Her coat, once dull and dirty, began to shine, revealing golden and black hues that made her look like a forest wolf. She was still thin, but her movements grew steadier, and her eyes, once filled with fear, now glowed with warmth. The puppies grew daily, their paws stronger, their coats thicker, their curiosity driving them to explore the enclosure, tumbling in the soft straw. Emily named them Luna, Storm, Spark, Mist, Dawn, and Tiny. Watching their clumsy play, she couldn't hold back smiles. Emily became their guardian angel. She came every day after work, bringing toys for the puppies, cleaning the enclosure, and talking to Maya like a friend. The Labrador, who once flinched at every sound, began to relax. She learned to take food from Emily's hand, and one quiet evening, she cautiously rested her head on Emily's lap, her warm breath brushing Emily's hand. Emily froze, afraid to ruin the moment. "You trust me, don't you?" she whispered, her eyes shining. But caring for Maya and her puppies was both a joy and a challenge. Tiny, the weakest pup, lagged in play, and Emily noticed his frailty with worry. Dr. Carter, visiting the shelter for checkups, warned that Tiny needed extra care. Maya, as if sensing this, stayed close to him, licking him more often than the others. Emily and Sarah devised a plan. Extra feedings for Tiny, warm pads, and regular checkups. Emily lay awake at night, worrying about the pup, but each of his steps fueled her hope. Maya and her puppies became the shelter's darlings. Staff, used to tough cases, admired the Labrador's resilience. "A true hero mom," Sarah said, watching Maya nudge her puppies gently with her nose. But Emily knew the shelter wasn't the end. She started searching for a home, posting about Maya's story on social media. The thought of parting tore at her heart, but she knew Maya and her pups deserved a real home. One morning, Sarah burst into the enclosure, beaming. "Emily, news! A family from the suburbs wants to take Maya and all the puppies together." Emily's heart skipped a beat, joy mingling with anxiety. Would Maya agree to leave the shelter? Would the new owners care for her? The family, Lisa and Michael, with their 2 children, 12-year-old Sophie and 8-year-old Ethan, arrived at the shelter. Their eyes lit up when they saw Maya and the puppies. Maya tensed, but Emily knelt beside her and spoke softly. "It's okay, girl. They're kind." Lisa crouched and extended her hand. Maya, after a pause, sniffed her fingers and gave a slight wag of her tail. The kids, holding back their excitement, petted the puppies, who licked their hands. Emily watched, her heart torn between joy and sadness. The move was set for the following week. Emily helped gather collars, toys, and a supply of food. On the last day, she sat with Maya in the enclosure, her hand stroking the Labrador's warm fur. Maya looked at her, her eyes, now clear and deep, full of gratitude. She whimpered softly and licked Emily's hand. "You changed my life," Emily whispered, tears falling. When the van with the new family drove off, Emily stood at the shelter's gate, her gaze following the dusty road. Her chest felt empty, but it was a bright emptiness. A month later, Lisa sent photos. Maya and the puppies romping in a garden, their eyes shining with joy. Maya, now proud and confident, had become the heart of the family. Emily pressed the photo to her chest, a smile touching her lips. Each time she passed that alley, she paused. The tarp was gone, only leaves swirling in the wind, but the memory of Maya and her puppies lived in her heart, a reminder that one act could change everything. Emily continued working with the shelter, helping other animals, but Maya's story became her beacon, proof that even the weakest can find a home if someone is willing to fight for them. Join us in making a difference. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay updated on heartwarming stories like Maya's. Get tips on helping animals in need, and support our mission to give every pet a loving home. Your support changes lives. Sign up today.